Hello. So happy to be here with Leah Thomas and Erika Alexander, two Shiro's amazing trailblazers, activists, artists, visionaries. And I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation about racial justice. And I am going to turn it over to Leah and Erika to introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump into some conversation. So Leah, as the youngest in the group, why don't we start with you, and then we'll go to Erika.
Amanda, don't make that assumption.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest in the group. But that's fine. Go ahead,
You really could. You really could.
Age before beauty. Age before beauty.
Beautiful. Yeah, hi, I'm Leah Thomas. I'm an environmental justice activist and writer, and I'm also the founder of the new intersectional environmentalist platform and resource.
Wonderful. My name is Erika Alexander. I'm an actress. I'm co-founder of Color Farm Media. I have been acting for 37 years, so you might have seen me in a lot of different places, but most people know me from Living Single. I played the Max character, Maxine Shaw. I also was in the Cosby Show before Max. I was Cousin Pam. And just recently, as of the past few years, people may have seen me in Get Out or Wu-Tang: An American Saga. I'm now doing a Quibi series called Swimming with Sharks. And also, I'm a producer and writer. So I wrote Concrete Park, which is a graphic novel, and also doing a series with Spotify right now. That's a narrative sci-fi series. So happy to be here. Thank you so much, ladies. Wonderful. Thank you. World War Z forever. Okay.
Z, hard.
Erika,
is there anything you cannot do, Leah? I mean,
maybe we should have started with because
the introductions of
I guess only millennials parts.
So I am humbled to be here. I don't deserve to be a moderator. I open myself to any questions that you have. I am a professor of journalism and science writing. I've written about environmental justice for years and climate science, and I'm at Vanderbilt University, and I open myself up to any questions or any corrections that you may have to my questions. But I do want to start with in the place that I think we all know is the most necessary place to start, which is the words of Eric Garner in 2014, the words of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020, and words that are really transforming the climate justice movement and so much in our democracy right now. And of course, the words are, "I can't breathe." You both have written in great depth about this, and I want to start with, what do those words mean to each of you? Let's start with you, Leah, and then go to Erika.
In many ways, I came to social justice before I came to environmentalism and environmental justice. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I went to school in Southern California, but I was back home the summer of 2014, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do and, typical summer break things. And I lived in Ferguson, Florissant, Missouri, so not too far from Ferguson, Missouri. And unfortunately, right after I decided to study environmental science and policy and get ready to go back to California to study, there was a shooting of an unarmed Black teenager named Michael Brown, who is just a few circles of friends away. And I remember that day so vividly, and going back to California and being expected to dive into my environmental science classes while my sister was being tear gassed and my family was protesting for my civil rights. And I just remember reading about the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and thinking about all of these protections. And I would always walk away and say, for who? Because if it's not for my community back home, who are these protections for? And I think that was just further echoed by, unfortunately, some of the last words of so many Black men in this country not being able to breathe, and especially during a pandemic that's also attacking the respiratory system. It is so troubling to me that there are 3 crises right now that are making it harder for Black people to breathe in this country and globally. But that's a little bit about how I got into environmental justice and what that meaning, that phrasing means to me.
I'm just remembering that I think Michael Brown was killed the same year
Mhm.
as Eric Garner,
Yeah.
2014. So that first I Can't Breathe, the beginning of that, incredibly tragic collection of words was the beginning of, your journey and for so many of us,
Mhm.
a kind of reckoning that seems to be, crescendoing right now. Erika, you've written so much about this. Also, what do you want to add to that?
Well, I think that to be Black in America is to be born into a racial and social justice movement. Whether you
Mhm.
agree to it or not, that's the world you're born into. And I think to be white in America is to be born into a social and racial justice movement. This is not a movement for Black and or whites. It's a human movement, but it's played in this sort of amphitheater and arena in America in a very unique way because we're an empire. So people are watching us figure these things out in real time and they're taking their cues from us. So what I like to say is that what you see is, at least from a racial justice point of view, is a moving target. It's always moving. It's always changing. It's growing. It's not a one and done type of thing. And what we do for ourselves, or what we do for the least of these we do for ourselves. So if you think about the environment and the fact that if people poison people who they think are expendable, there is just a short matter of time where you will see that those ramifications have very huge consequences for you. So environmental justice is always, to me, tied to racial and social justice. And where you see the healthy environments, you see healthy people, you see people who care for one another. And so my hope is in discussing this and moving forward, that we see how tied we are to each other. And the essential worker that we all agree now we need has always been essential. And we can't
Mhm.
ever make them non-essential, but we all need to know that the essentialness of living and breathing oxygen and food and all the things that we take for granted because it just comes on our plate in a wrapper. Someone probably has suffered and or is paying for that in some way, and we need to make sure it's balanced.
That's such a beautiful way of putting it. I mean, this is the environment and natural resources are the most essential, and should be the most freely available and democratic resources and rights, civil rights. And there's so much distance between that essential, that essential reality and this notion that we associate the environment with polar bears and these sort of far-flung endangered species. Really, it's about what is most essential to our existence. Leah, you wrote or said in a video that I saw of you that if environmentalism isn't inclusive and intersectional, it doesn't really stand for justice at all. Can you elaborate on that point, which is so crucial?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked at a lot of environmental organizations and I haven't. So I have gone to marches for salmon, for endangered salmon. I have gone to marches and stood alongside my fellow white environmentalists advocating for the smallest of organisms and sometimes doubly risked my life by being at a protest because I know that police violence would be, disproportionately potentially impact me in those situations. So I've risked my life to stand alongside white environmentalists advocating for issues of endangered species. However, there seemed to be a lack of acknowledgement of endangered Black bodies in this country. And when I felt the environmental community, there's silence at some of the organizations that I was a part of during this resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, it made me think, like, how can this type of environmentalism stand for justice when it seems to stand for everything that isn't Black, or it seems to stand in support for all of these different causes, for salmon, for the polar bear, for endangered species, for white men, but not Black people. And I just realized that if this is what environmentalism is, this is not a type of environmentalism that I would like to be a part of. So I decided to release my definition of intersectional environmentalism into the environmental community, which I got from an incredible Black scholar named Kimberly Crenshaw, who created the intersectionality framework. So I made this new version of environmentalism until environmentalists can get to a place where they have social justice deeply embedded into the definition of environmentalism, because I don't want to be a part of any environmentalism that doesn't advocate for the protections of Black and Brown lives.
Everybody who's watching needs to look up Kimberly Crenshaw and read her work and follow what she's doing, because it's so important. Erika, you wrote in an essay titled "I Can't Breathe," something that really reminded me of a comment that famously President Obama made about the most important word in our democracy is "we." And you wrote in your essay, we have to unite if we're going up against this oppression of injustices. We need to look beyond ourselves, our political views, and our comfort zones. Can you address that, the we here, and who you're invoking when you say that, and what it means to expand and transform our understanding of we, particularly as it relates to climate change and the environment and public health?
Sure, I'll do my best, and I'll give an example of a project that I'm doing now to sort of highlight it. But we're often told during elections to vote for our own interests, our best interests. And I think our best interest is our collective interests. That's a we move, not a me move, not my family do me good, but what would do the best thing for most of us, because you can't always do it for everybody. But if you think that way, then you would probably make better choices overall. You wouldn't think red state, blue state. You think, wait a minute, how does this affect other people and not just me and my family and my bottom line? And I believe that one of the best men to show us what that was about is Congressman John Lewis. I happen to be doing a documentary and it's coming out, and I have to mention that because John Lewis is a person who committed his life for civil rights and justice for all. Justice for all. You know, he didn't, that's not a, again, that's a we move. And if you really are thinking about it, that means that you're willing to put yourself on the line for those ideals. And he did it. He did it without malice. He did it with courage of his convictions. He did it knowing that he was doing it with the philosophy of nonviolence and through peaceful protests. He called something the beloved community. That's what he said. It was Martin Luther King too that called about the beloved community. And I think that both President Obama and anybody that he invokes a we conversation is talking about something that's greater than themselves, and often not even something that they're living in the moment. You can be for other people and still not have justice for yourself. That's deep. When you ain't got it for yourself, but you fighting for it for everybody else, that's we. That's a true we.
And as that, and by the way, we should just create a little bit more of a moment for this amazing documentary you're doing on Congressman John Lewis. When does that come out, and when can we look for it?
That's July 3rd. It'll be coming out in theaters that are open and that are carrying it, but also people be able to get it day and date with streaming services and things like that. It's going to be in drive-in movie theaters too. So, you know, I'm going to go see it at the Rose Bowl. Thank you, Leah. I'm going to go see it at the Rose Bowl. And we've had to learn the we movement. So here's an example in Hollywood, a real living example of up until this point, we released movies in separate sort of boxes and silos. And if you had big movie money and you were a studio, then you could release it one way. If you're an independent, you had to release it another. If you were another, boom, in all these different, but now we're realizing, because there are no theaters in that traditional way, that in order to engage people and get your message out, you're going to have to call organizations, whether it's NAACP, the UNCF, the HBCUs, AARP, all these types of things, NFL, NBA, and say, would you screen this movie for your employees, and would you push it out? And what types of conversations and programs can we create together in order to make this happen? And John Lewis is somebody that, for all the reasons that he's lived, no one argues against. They're
Yeah.
willing to come to a we moment for. And we have been very gratified through the releasing of this film and the participation of partners that have never come together before to create a moment to lay in tribute for this man, but also remove that and you see how we should have always been working together, how we could always commit to a creative coalition. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can all do good by doing well.
I can't think of a better way to spend uh, July 4th, to honor our country than to watch that documentary. Erika, I think we need to, Leah, I want to step back just a bit because I think there are probably a lot of people in this audience who don't quite know how to define climate justice. And I think there's a sort of broad definition, and there's also a very personal definition. You've shared some of your personal definition. How would you define climate justice? I'd love to hear first from you, Leah, and Erika, if you want to sort of broaden or add on to her definition. I'd love to
I'm
hear.
sure that she needs no help. Lay it on, Leah.
I might. I might need a little bit of help, but I try to keep it pretty simple at first. The term intersectional environmentalism I feel like is very similar to climate justice or intersection. Intersectional environmentalism is the path to achieve climate justice and environmental justice, in my opinion. So I just see it as the protection of both people and the planet, and I try to keep it really, really simple. And then I can dive into the data about how Black and Brown communities are disproportionately impacted by environmental injustices, all the environmental injustices, not just one. So when it comes to toxic waste sites and it comes to particulate matter in air, so air quality, water quality, proximity to toxic waste or landfills, it's unfair. When you look at the data, environmental racism is very real and happening in the United States and globally. Because when you look also at, I've been trying not to say small island nations. Someone told me to say large ocean countries instead, which I feel like just seems bigger and beautiful, it doesn't seem so
I love
small, and I love it.
large
But a lot of,
countries.
what are they? Yeah, big
Large
ocean
ocean,
countries,
Big ocean,
large. Yeah, I love it so much. And when you think of that, a lot of those large ocean countries are also occupied by people of color, and so globally, it's a global scale of people of color being impacted by environmental injustices the most. And that's, to me, the clearest definition of environmental racism and a reason for all environmentalists to be anti-racist. So I think intersectional environmentalism, just to put it short and simple for people to walk away with it, is advocating for both the protection of people and the planet. And those things, in my opinion, can't be separated because they're so interconnected. And I keep going back to the salmon. I love salmon, but sometimes when people think about endangered salmon or endangered species, they don't think about the communities that are being supported. And a lot of times,
yeah.
like Indigenous or First Nation communities in the United States might be living off of those endangered salmon. So to just take it one step further and think about the interconnectedness of people and the planet. And I think it's a bigger societal issue why there is a distinction, because people think when we come to our homes and when we come to our neighborhoods, they think that nature is something that you can go into. They think about national parks or the beach or the mountains, but they don't realize that we're all a part of this global ecosystem. And I think when we get back to that, it'll be a lot easier for environmentalists to realize why they should be advocating for Black lives and why they should be advocating for the protection of all people and the planet.
Beautiful. Okay, we're done. that was beautiful.
Done.
That does seem like a uniquely Western and probably a uniquely American or United Statesian construct, that there's any distinction between planetary well-being and human well-being. I mean, it's so intrinsic in so many ways of thinking, in particular Indigenous thought and spiritual practices, that planetary well-being and human well-being are inextricable. So the notion is not how do we weave them together, it's how do we reweave them together, right? How do we return to a kind of thinking that is as deep and old as human civilization.
Yeah. And honestly, just going off of that really quickly, I think it's silly because environmentalism wouldn't be able to exist as it is today without the cultural traditions of so many Black and Brown communities or Indigenous wisdom that has inspired what environmentalism is today. And I just find it to be very silly not to listen to and uplift the voices of people who have historically actually had better relationships with the land.
Better relationship. I mean, so important, and so much Black land, farmland, and Black heritage has been stolen
Mhm.
over centuries, and that's such an important part of this conversation. Erica, do you want to add um, to Leah's definition and sort of commentary on climate justice and the way that we define it and think about it?
I think she's done such a wonderful job. It's hard to build on that, but I think that again that here we are in this empire, and we talk about us as capitalism and all these other things, and I think that the proof of whether we're successful in this democracy and this experiment is the conditions of freedom and justice are always mired inside of our environment. The environment we create for ourselves in our homes, the environment of our own body, our temple, and then it works outward, our minds. This is an environment, and then it goes like that in sort of concentric circles. And if you've polluted it in any way, and that mind goes through, that the philosophy goes through the mind, you will see the example and results of that pollution outside of yourself. And so before England was ever England and an empire that was by an amazing measure colonized the world, it was a small cold rock. And they were trying to figure it out between themselves and fighting the Vikings and everybody else. And they had to work together eventually to build, this empire. And then it collapsed because you're not able to police Black and brown people to just do your bidding, and they get nothing from that empire. And so we're
Yeah.
seeing our collapse in a way because we haven't taken care of the environment around us, and our thinking muddled and corrupted the way we saw people or saw that their lives should be for ourselves. So when we think about the clothes we wear, who's making them, those types of things, that's an environmental pollution of thought.
Mm.
So it makes sense, total sense, that we are seeing the earth die. Now, the earth will, I always believe this, and there you might tell me I'm wrong. I think it will, um, it will survive us. We will not survive it. It is starting to say, y'all got to go. It's curing the cancer on it. It's
Mhm.
saying, I'm gonna blow you away with hurricanes, fires, floods, and plagues. And we will look up those left and say, damn, she's going to correct it. It is going to correct the situation. We better decide that we have to live inside. We're living inside of something, and it thinks we are inhospitable to it. And so now we're suffering the consequences of that.
Yeah, and it's you said that so beautifully, and I'm just thinking about back to the we, and this moment of destruction, and also this opportunity to reimagine and recohere, right? When we face the brink of so much peril. I mean, natural peril, human health peril, social justice peril. It's in that moment that we begin to reimagine the we, and common ground and collaboration, and reweave ourselves into traditions, into holistic thinking, and this combination of of danger and threat, and these amazing environmental pressures and public health problems, and amazing injustices, and this exactly this, the conversations, the reimaginings of we. It's both. It's destruction and hopefully an opportunity for reckoning and rebirth. Do you think that is the case, Erica? Are we seeing or are we seeing a kind of reimagining of we? How much progress do you think we are making and have the opportunity to make?
I I'm I may be a little bit more pessimistic than others. You have, a lot of water under that bridge. My hope, and I don't like to use that word so much. I believe I like good works and intentions and action. Don't hope for nothing, be about it, don't talk about it. But my hope is that people see this as a moment and they don't see it as something to get out of, to reform, ref, ref, a project of reformation for themselves and others won't become something that's just something to get through temporarily till we can get back to normal. And people have been using that a lot. And so I believe that when I'm old enough to start to see that young people are the future, but I also believe that older people will destroy that future if you leave them to it, because we need to act fast. This is not something to be chatting about. So I hope. I mean, I think life conspires to find a way, and we 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 want to put all these things together to play this ridiculously beautiful piece of music. But if we're acting separately, we don't come together, then we're all just tooting our own horns. And now with social media, you can think you're doing more than you are because you sent out a tweet, and the truth is you're not recycling at home. You're not cutting off the water when you can. You're being greedy with things, and not littering, and littering even with thoughts, putting out hateful things, as opposed to saying it starts with me and no one sees me doing this, but damn it, I'm gonna put the plastic with the plastics and the cup, the paper with the paper. Because sometimes I look at it and it's so they show you how much plastic is in the ocean. I can't even I can't even take it. I'm like, what am I supposed to do about that? I said, I don't know, but I'll try to use less plastic products. So here I am trying to do what I can where I can with my pessimistic attitude, but my optimistic action.
Optimistic action. Thank you. That's it. And Leah, we I know you have read and we've talked about the opinion piece by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson in the Washington
Mhm.
Post, and in it she writes, and she includes this, the fact that uh, there's a far larger portion of Black Americans not only affected by the climate crisis but concerned about the climate crisis.
Mhm.
And she says that 57% of Black Americans are concerned about climate change, whereas 49% of white Americans. That's a statistic from that piece. And at the same time, you've talked about being sometimes the only Black member of an environmental organization, and there's just this still a huge imbalance there. Can you address that and what you think
Yeah,
needs to be done?
I'm absolutely over that. And that's why I decided to create my own organization so that won't be the case. But so I'm really excited about that. But yeah, it's really frustrating. I think some of these organizations, like, it's very, I don't want to call anyone out or say anything bad, but I think in the past, before I had a moment of, I guess, viralness or whatever you would call it online, like, those same organizations didn't see value in me when I was saying the same things about advocating for Black and Brown people in the context of environmentalism for years. But then when I received external validation from other environmental organizations or people that people might deem as being celebrities, then those same environmental organizations came back and said, "Oh, we've always believed in you. We've always believed in you." And it's just been really interesting to see. And I think part of the problem is it comes with privilege to be able to separate your environmentalism from your background, your race, and your culture. Because for me, my lens of environmentalism has always been a lens of being parallel to my Blackness. My Blackness inspires my environmentalism and is the reason I'm an environmentalist?
Yeah.
So I think it's a privilege to be able to turn that off or ignore it and think that your culture has nothing to do with your view of the world and nature around you or how you experience nature around you. So I think breaking through that kind of like white fragility sometimes in environmental organizations is especially hard because environmentalists are nice, usually well intentioned, forward thinking people who have mason jars and reusable straws, and they're advocating for a better earth. And I think when you're talking to someone, sometimes the ego can get involved because if someone sees themselves as a forward thinking person and you come through and you say, hey, I support this environmental mission, but can we make sure we're including Black and Brown voices and lives in this environmental mission? And here's all the data about environmental injustice and why we need to do this as environmentalists. There's a lot of fragility and defensiveness and pushback because you're telling someone who already sees themselves as, you know, progressive that maybe there's something, you know, to consider. And I think I've actually found it harder to have conversations at times with white progressives than sometimes even white Republicans or conservatives at times because I've lived in super rural Kansas for an internship at Nicodemus National Historic Site, which is one of the smallest national parks, but honestly one of the best because a lot of people don't know that this historic site was one of the first towns after slavery that was built by freed African Americans and was a functioning town and has such beautiful history. And I lived there for 3 months. And there were a lot of people who were conservative, but were willing to listen to me and talk to me about certain things. But when I'm in Southern California and heavily liberal environmental organizations, sometimes it's harder because people don't want to be racist, I guess. And I think sometimes it's just I want to tell people criticism or constructive criticism doesn't mean that you're suddenly racist. It just means that, you know, there's things that you can maybe consider. So I think that fragility component is what makes it so difficult for me, which is frustrating because usually I'm pretty soft spoken. But even if I was yelling, they should listen because I have every reason to yell because there's some really terrible injustices that are happening. But yeah, I definitely think it's that fragility piece that makes it very difficult.
I have to ask you to tell us a little bit more about the organization that you're starting, because and which gets you beyond a lot of that distraction and so important. And I just want to mention before you share that, um, and you know, this another quote from Ayanna Johnson in her Washington Post op-ed is, how can we expect Black Americans to focus on climate when we are so at risk on our streets, in our communities, and even within our homes? I would love to ignore racism and focus all my
Mhm.
attention on climate, but I can't. Um, and I think that's really speaks to what you were saying in your last comment, that, you know, in fact, it became very distracting for you in these environments of, you know, white progressive environmentalists, who may be, you know, at maximum white fragility. uh, and that became that sucked up so much of your time, is just
Yeah.
navigating that environment. So creating
Mhm.
your own organization gives you a place to focus, and I would think among, you know, and do the work you want to do. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm super excited. It's also a baby organization. So it's only been around for about 3 weeks, but intersectional environmentalist, it kind of has three different parts to it. So part of it is that social media educational space because we wanted to provide younger environmentalists who, statistically speaking, are more interested in climate justice and exploring the intersections of environmentalism and social justice. If they didn't have a community yet, we wanted to provide one for them with shareable content and information so they could learn and feel like they were a part of a new movement, an intersectional environmentalist movement. And we wanted to make Black and Brown people and environmentalists who have felt unheard for so long. We wanted to give them a place to feel seen. So that's the social media and kind of editorial thing that we're doing with that platform, which is a lot of fun. And in addition to that, some of the work that we're doing is also finding ways to amplify Black and Brown organizations, also LGBTQ plus organizations. And we have right now in the first version, if you go to the website, you can kind of explore these different communities, and you'll find resources, films, literature, poetry, activists that you should follow, nonprofits that you should support, books that you should read, because so many people were asking me questions. It was a little exhausting. So I just said, you know what, we're going to put this together. And then you have no excuse, because we're making the case with this website that these two things go together. Environmentalism and social justice and culture go together. So we're making the case on our website. And in addition to that, working at these environmental organizations, I noticed that B Corporation, Fair Trade certification status, 1% for the planet certification status, there's all these fancy certifications that are, yes, doing incredible things when it comes to how sustainable a supply chain is. But these same organizations that care so much about ethical manufacturing have no protections in place for the Black and brown people that are working inside of their organizations. And that seemed like a big miss to me, because you can be certified, but you don't have any internal data or metrics to make sure that Black and brown voices are being amplified and protected within that organization. So we're working on a business accountability program opposed to a certification, because we wanted to make it more accessible. And it's going to be a year-long program. We have over 300 businesses that want to be a part of it, but we're probably going to whittle it down to about 100 for the first year due to bandwidth. And we're going to create this space. We are going to audit them in a way and kind of encourage them and give them suggestions on what they can work on. And that audit will also include metrics for how diverse that organization is, not just in entry-level positions, because that's where they'll get you, but also your board, also your C-suite, also management positions. So that's going to be a part of our program. But it's a way to call businesses in versus call them out, and we'll guarantee our confidentiality and help them work through this, so they can become intersectional environmentalist organizations that advocate for both people and the planet, and they can gain back that trust of their community. Because right now companies are being called out left and right. I did right left, but okay, directions, but they're being called out a lot. And I think it's a really important time for businesses to learn. And we are a loving and compassionate but direct, because you can be compassionate and direct and advocate for yourself at the same time. And that's what we're going to do as an organization.
I mean, wow, that's amazing, and it's three weeks old. Can you give us the name and website address?
Yeah, it's called Intersectional Environmentalist. You can go to intersectionalenvironmentalist.com or follow us on Instagram. Also, hopefully in summer of next year, I will be writing a book that will be released. So stay tuned for that.
Snaps, thumbs, everything. So Erika, I know you have to go in just a few minutes, and I wanted to just ask one last question of you, and then one last question of the both of you. You have been advocating for social justice for decades, even though you really look exactly the same age as Leah, of course. But you've really been out there for decades.
The gin and tonics. I'm well preserved.
Oh,
well preserved.
Well, is that the secret? Oh my goodness! I'll have to hit some more gin and tonics.
No.
No. You have such a deep history, and I just wanted to turn that question to you about, is it that I asked of Erika, of Leah, that that's what Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson said, that I would love to ignore racism and focus all my attention on climate or some other issue, but I can't. How does that resonate with you?
Racism is environmental justice. It is the fight for environment. Sorry, I don't believe they're separate. I believe that you fight for them at the same time. Again, these crimes are being committed because of racism. You can put a toxic, polluted site next to a neighborhood that people think those are just niggas. Let's just be real. You can put it next to people who are in far off countries that we don't have to see them, and how they pick through that garbage that we send to them on ships by the tons every year. And then they're supposed to dispose of it where they have looser laws so they can dump it in the ocean for us or put it in landfills. But you only did that because your people didn't live there. That's the truth.
Yeah.
It's the do unto other conundrum. And we need to think about do unto others what eventually will be done to you. That's what needs to be talked about. And I love the idea of this young woman's, talking about you, Leah, and website. And as soon as I learn how to spell it, I'm gonna visit it. You can turn that, because I think it's awesome that someone with her face, coming from the background that she comes from, is advocating inside of this space. Obviously with her beautiful long tresses and the way she looks and her wide-eyed look, she looks like something Disney animated, and boom, just gave to us. It's fabulous. But people listen to her and lock into her message in a way. And we need the new John Lewis's and the new Kings and the new Fannie Lou Hamers and the new the people that we admire to come forward, and they're of all colors. I like to say something a little bit about how I see this time happening right now, because I look at how can we help ourselves with music, and y'all young people need to see it like this. There is nothing new under the sun. We just keep reproducing the same circumstances, and I think they get a lot more intense. Like, yes, never been a global pandemic. Wow, everyone was aware of it. You know what I mean? And everybody could travel so quickly to each other. So now we're in it, and now we're having a global meltdown financially, and we're having all this other stuff happening at the same time. But I believe that we should look to our musicians and our creators out there doing the good works. I love Earth, Wind, and Fire, because those cats back in the day, remember, they came from the 60s. Everybody was being assassinated, killed, Vietnam, all sorts of craziness. And they made their group called Earth, Wind, and Fire, because they were calling upon the elements to come and save and heal this world, which is what we're dealing with right now. Think of Marvin Gaye. He said, what's going on? They were dealing with the same things. He was saying, look at our earth. It's crying out. They were afraid then. Diana Ross said, reach out and touch someone's hand. Make this world a better place if you can. All these messages. Joni Mitchell, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? Sting, fragile. See, Sting is a prophet, poet. Put on that music and infuse it through you, and let it undergird your actions. And as you're intentional, and as she say, environmentalists are nice, but they're aggressive. And they are full of don't come for them. They've made a commitment and dedication to a lifestyle many times over, and to a way of thought. And you don't have to do all that to do a lot more to help us all. I'm not doing what I'm doing for Sister Leah here. I'm doing it for myself, and I want to be guided by Leah, because she's going to tell me. I say, girl, tell me what I can do. And then I help Leah, because she's guiding me to be a better me. And again, that's a pollution of thought, to be selfish when you can be selfless. And then suddenly her design is in full. She's sent out her love and her guidance, and now I'm in it, and I didn't even know I'm caught up in it. I'm caught up in it today. Now I can't get out of it. It's like a web. So I don't want to get out of it, because it's a good thing. So I just want to say that we need to look to all those people and ask ourselves, and put on music that, oh, by the way, Stevie Wonder's The Secret Life of Plants. When Stevie Wonder was young, come on. He said, this is what they sound like. We have people who have designed even our soundscape. Let's put that on in the background and let it lead us toward a better, more perfect union.
Leah, what an amazing gift you just received from Erika Alexander.
In my global rant.
No, it was such a beautiful and such a loving exchange and support of this amazing young woman. Leah, you deserve a moment to, first of all, process that, and I hope you can put it on replay.
Yeah, I will.
Oh, well, she might need some kaopectate. Using fouls.
Do you want to please take a moment to respond to Erika?
I don't even know how to follow it up. I'm just so thankful, and I love Black women so much. Like, Black women are magical, And I just love seeing Black girl joy. And it just makes me so happy that I can occupy the same virtual space as you. It's so, so cool. But I
Yeah.
guess on just one ending thought, like intersectional environmentalism, the platform, the definition, everything, like it's cool. I love it. And I hope that it will exist for a while. But I think my biggest dream would be if one day, like I said earlier, we don't need the term intersectional to preface what an environmentalist means. And when people think of an environmentalist, they automatically think of someone that's going to advocate for marginalized communities and the planet at the same time. And if that happens one day, I think that would be my biggest dream come true. But until then, intersectional environmentalist. But I mean, it'd be really cool if one day we don't need that. And just the definition of environmentalism has social justice and climate justice just so deeply embedded into it. I think we're going to have a greener future and a safer future for all people. And that just makes me really happy. So.
Well, in the meantime, we will remember intersectionalenvironmentalist.com, and we will put on Marvin Gaye and Joni Mitchell and Sting and
the
Otis
Duke brothers.
Redding,
No.
and we'll put on all the anthems, and we will throw off the need for the terms. And you're so right, Erika. To get there, we need music, and we need nonverbal communication. We need so much more, that we need these conversations, and we need to
it.
I mean, I was intimidated to have this conversation because it's hard.
Me too.
I don't know the questions to ask. So we need to be there in that discomfort. And then we also need to stop talking and put on some music and dance. And then everybody needs to get Erika's shirt and send the sunshine out there.
100%.
Because it's like I flew in from the Starship Enterprise to lay it on y'all. And I'm sitting, you could, Scotty, beam me up, Speedy. Beam me up. I wish I could. That or Wakanda, baby. Whatever can come get me at this point, I'm fine with. I'll go to Wakanda. I'm good. But, thank you so much, Sister Amanda Little. You have been wonderful. And thank you so much for teaching at Fisk and HBCU, John Lewis, alma mater. And thank you for all that you're doing with your book, The Fate of Food, which I'm going to go get. And I appreciate that you're looking into it, because now, because of environmentalists, every time I eat a piece of fruit, I'm looking for organic. I'm buying stuff to clean it with. I'm washing things off. That was not my life beforehand a few years ago. And it's because you are imprinting on us. Things are changing. I know if they can change with me, and by the way, I'm not the hardest nut in the group, they will change with others. So each one teach one. Thank you so much for all that you guys are doing. And thank you, Sean England.
Thank you.
I called
Truly
you
an honor.
England. England, let's do it for England.
Do it for England. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, World War Zero.
World War Zero.
Yeah, are you guys gonna stay?
Z.